Good evening and welcome. I am Amarachi Ubani. Tonight, Nigeria's Vice President Yemi Osinbajo warns soldiers against divisive tendencies, also solicits their support for a united country. Acting Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onogan, calls for caution over clamour on his confirmation as CJN. Nigerian troops on peacekeeping mission in Gambia return home after what the commander calls a successful mission in Banjul. And former DR Congo veteran opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi dies at the age of 84.
On business news tonight, Nigeria's proposed Eurobond issue gets a B rating from Standard & Poor's. Nigeria's Professional Football League champions Rangers International handed 2.75 million naira fine for unruly conduct of their supporters.
And from Abuja, I'm Gloria Umezuke. Tonight, respite for residents of Pape settlement near Abuja as an FCT court stops demolition of their homes.
The General Court Martial of 7 divisions sitting in Maiduguri has sentenced a serving soldier to 7 years imprisonment for manslaughter. The unnamed soldier is being prosecuted for killing a civilian at the popular Monday market in Maiduguri metropolis on December 23, 2015.
Having found you guilty of the offence of manslaughter and having listened to the presentation of the prosecution, urging the court to treat you as a first offender, and your touching plea in mitigation, we have also looked at the various punishments provided by both Section 105 of Armed Forces Act, Cap 820 laws of the Federation, as well as Section 119 of Armed Forces Act, Cap 820 laws of the Federation. The court also considered the need to ensure maintenance of discipline, especially as our counter-terrorism and counter-insurgency war fighting continues. The court hereby sentenced you as follows. Count 1, 7 years imprisonment. This sentence is, however, subject to confirmation by the confirming authority as provided by Section 141, subparagraph 2, and Section 152, subparagraph 1A of the Armed Forces Act.
Meanwhile, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, has asked the military to resist divisive forces that undermine national unity and economic growth. Professor Osinbajo made the call at a lecture with Course 25 of the National Defense College in Abuja. According to the Vice President, divisive forces and corruption are major threats to national unity and economic prosperity.
The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, arrived in the National Defense College with his entourage. He inspects a guard of honor mounted for him before proceeding to the Sani Abacha Hall, where he is to deliver his lecture on the economic dimension of national security to participants of Course 25 of the National Defense College. The commandant of the college explains the choice of the guest lecturer and the theme of the lecture.
The acting president is also the head of the economic team of our nation. This lecture is vital to the National Defense College as it provides the opportunity to learn the current economic drive of the country.
The Vice President then takes to the podium. He explains how the activities of the Niger Delta militants and Boko Haram in the northeast have negatively affected the nation's economy. He then calls on the Nigerian army to resist any divisive force that undermines national unity and economic prosperity.
Those of us who have the privilege, like you and I, to be in the public service, to be serving our nation, do our own part. And this is why the military is so important. Those who want to divide us on the basis of ethnicity, we must fight it, we must resist it.
Speaking further on the federal government's economic recovery plans, the Vice President calls for the rejigging of the nation's civil and criminal justice system.
The truth of the matter is that hardly anybody gets prosecuted to conviction in Nigeria, poor or rich. Hardly anybody gets prosecuted. And the reason is because we have a criminal justice system that has failed and needs to be rejigged in order to succeed.
Many in this hall argue strongly that national security and economic prosperity are like Siamese twins that cannot be separated. Hence, the military must work to ensure national security.
The Army's mop-up exercise in the northeast has continued to yield positive results. Commander of Operation Lafia Dole, Major General Lucky Rabo, listed successes today at the Army's weekly briefing in Maiduguri, the Borno state capital. He said men of the special operation intercepted a letter written by the terror group Boko Haram seeking support in arms and ammunition.
Major General Lucky Rabo, the component commanders, the acting general officer commanding 7th Nigerian Army.
You must be very familiar now with these pictures as hosted by the Nigerian Army. Since December 2016, the Army on the platform codenamed Operation Lafia Dole brings updates of victories, challenges, advancements, and general information about the Army's engagements against the Boko Haram terrorists. Once again, Major General Lucky Rabo is bringing you up to speed on the latest.
On the 18th, troops, of course, also at Musamari, Musara, as well as Gunari, intercepted 8 men who were conveying items that are suspected to be for the Boko Haram terrorists. The suspects, when they were searched, we discovered that one of them had 2 letters, with one of the letters requesting for the supply of 4 anti-aircraft guns by the Boko Haram terrorists.
Great strides judging from the statistics, but it does appear it is not yet uhuru if you consider the recent bombing of an area occupied by civilians. Was it an operational error or an accident?
It was a mistake. I've mentioned that a coordinate was received from the ISR platform, and that was what was passed to the pilots. And even just to say that, even by logic, the following day an attack came to that location. And then in the number that they came, that gives you an indication that something actually was sighted. But an error of having to say this is the coordinate is where, in my view, has happened. Of course, it's been established as such. So, but other details, as we make progress, you'll be told.
There are still evidences of the terrorist resistance. Abubakar had his hand and his leg chopped off by the group for denouncing them and surrendering to the Nigerian military.
Within the period, a total of 3,332 civilians who, of course, we consider to be suspects were screened. Now, why I say suspects? Because given the level that we are now, whoever is left in some of the places that we're entering, we can't just say that they are civilians. If they are not Boko Haram terrorists, they are sympathizers or those that we need to carry our further work on.
In accepting the assurances of the highest regards that the defeat of the Boko Haram is not a hoax, this sort of briefing will have to continue for a while to come. With eyes fixed on the ball, government forces must eliminate to a minimal level incidences of suicide bombing and smoke out fleeing members of the insurgent group. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
Live press conference.
Well, we seem to be heavy on security stories tonight with the meeting of the Vice President and the Senate leadership on the return of the Nigerian troops in the Gambia, and then the trial of the 7 soldiers for manslaughter in the appeal by the Vice President of the Armed Forces to remain loyal to the federal government. And finally, the briefing of Major General Lucky Rabo on operations in the Sambisa forest. Joining me now to look at all of these tonight is a retired Army Intelligence Officer, Colonel Hassan Stan Labo. thank you for joining us tonight on the News at 10.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's begin from the bottom. The theatre commander of Operation Lafia Dole gave an update on the operation of the troops in the Sambisa forest. This is coming at a time when we still have pockets of, suicide bombings, especially in Maiduguri and in the northeast and some other areas. Are you satisfied with the progress that he listed?
Yes, Amarachi, I would say I'm extremely satisfied. I'm impressed, and I'm full of accolades for our military. One thing we need to understand is that, first and foremost, let's get this straight. We've won the battle. We've won the war. We are now on to winning the peace. And to do this, we have to engage the hearts and minds of the populace and try to, penetrate them and assuage them as much as possible. Insurgency, we must get this right, can relatively easily be, crushed by way of well laid out military lines of operations. But when it comes to terrorism, I must tell you this, my sister, it calls for huge investment in intelligence. And that is where I would say citizen participation really comes in as a requirement. The citizen must be seen taking his personal, taking possession of his personal security, that of his neighborhood and community. All right? We must see ourselves reactivating every aspect of our neighborhood community policing as much as possible, and contributing as much as we can in terms of information to the appropriate authorities, be it the local police or be it the military, depending on what part of the country we find ourselves, and so on, and not just being relaxed.
Did you see that? Have you seen that playing out in the Northeast, this citizen responsibility that you're talking about?
Yes, of course. Of course, we are seeing it playing out, and that's to let you know that I think the military is really gaining grounds in the Northeast. If some people are really ready to go back, like we are already seeing, and most of the recovered territories are already being occupied, and the military is already gradually handing on constituted civil authorities, the police and so on. I think these are all plus on the side of the military.
Let's look at this 7 soldiers that were court-martialed for manslaughter. One of them was eventually given a life imprisonment for manslaughter. How do you think military-civilian relationship has played out in the country in the past few months, given that this incident has occurred and it happened in 2015?
First and foremost, the court-martial incident, I would tell you this, speaks volume of the internal corrective mechanism within the military as an institution. Okay, I only hope organizations like Amnesty are seeing what's happening and to take note rather than just being unduly, criticizing the entire system. All right, it speaks volume of that, and I think we are so impressed. And what was the second part of your question?
No, it is still the same question though, but military-civil relationship.
Yes, CIMIC, as we call it, that's civil-military relationship. We have a general now who is driving the process, General Rogers. And I think the senior officer is doing quite a fine, good job. The Army is already in several locations in the Northeast as we speak, involved even in classroom teachings of some children. We have men from the Army Education Corps who are assisting in that way. We are aware that the military is also engaging the IDPs or the vulnerables who have even been that have returned with all sorts of humanitarian items and so on. And I think the relationship between the military and the what's it called now? The various organizations within the theater, okay, that are carrying out one humanitarian organization, humanitarian task or the other, especially the NGOs, is so cordial to the point that it assists in driving the entire process to see that some level of relief gets to the populace within the Northeast. Most importantly, too, we must commend the synergy within the Northeast axis amongst the coalition of nations around the Lake Chad Basin Commission. is highly commendable.
That's a very different narrative from what rights groups such as Amnesty, which you mentioned earlier, has even painted. But let's talk about the Nigerian troops that are just returned from ECOWAS. I guess we will talk about that maybe the next time you come. But very quickly, could you just talk about the troops that have returned and their work in the Gambia?
Yeah, it was a commendable feat. I mean, the mandates from ECOWAS to the coalition of troops from 5 countries that were supposed to ensure that the environment is conducive for Barrow's takeover as the new president. I think they did a fantastic job. I made to understand those that are coming back are more of the air component. I think what is left to be done on ground now is more or less within the ambit of the land forces. So we wouldn't be surprised if there is this reduction in strength.
Colonel Hassan Stamnabo, thank you so much for joining us tonight. In part 2, after the break, Acting Chief Justice of Nigeria advises Nigerians not to pressurize the president over his confirmation. Please stay with us.